And here we are in chapter 14. Today we're going to talk about hallucinogens. You will have a slightly longer discussion about hallucinogens. This is an area that I do find really interesting at this time because there is new research out that looks at hallucinogens for mental health issues. So let's get started here. Animism and religion. So animism is a term that says, objects attain certain characteristics because of their spirits. If a plant contains a spirit, then eating the plant transfers the spirit into the person who consumes it. Okay. I am not personally saying that a plant has a spirit. I'm saying that some people believe that that's what's going on, and that, I think a lot of people believe that God gave us these plants that have psychoactive properties, and when they use them, they see the world as a whole, and they see everything as connected, including the plants and the spirits and the people and the animals and all of that. Okay. Psychoactive plants alter perceptions. Psychoactive plants that alter perceptions may have been important in the development of spiritual and religious traditions. They definitely played a role in folklore in many societies. Okay, now terminology. These are words that, of course, you want to know. We have our Phantastica, psychedelic, and psychotomimetic. Okay. Now, Phantastica just simply means drugs that create a world of fantasy. Any drug that creates a world of fantasy can go in the Phantastica category. Psychedelic. The word psychedelic, I won't go into all of the history. It will take way too long. But there were a couple guys that were sitting around really thinking about what to call these drugs, and they came up with lots of different ideas before finally coming up with the word psychedelic that means mind viewing. It implies a beneficial, visionary type of effect. Now, the word psychotomimetic means mimicking psychosis, okay? And that is that these drugs produce hallucinations, they alter reality, and they bring you to a state that's similar to psychosis. Some people that's good, some people that is not good. Now, we have other words here, entheogens, entactogens, and hallucinogens. Again, some of these words are more popular than others. Entheogen is becoming more popular right now, and of course, hallucinogens. Now, an entheogen, and notice the word theo, which you can think of the word theology, is in this word. So it's a substance that creates spiritual or religious experiences. Some people, this happens naturally. Some people are aided by these hallucinogenic drugs. Now, entactogen, that is a substance that enhances feelings of empathy. Some drugs do more of the first than the second. Some drugs do more of the second than the first. Some do both. Hallucinogens. This is a drug that produces found alterations in perception. So including things like unusual visual sensations, often changes in perception of one's own body. Okay, that's hallucinogens. So, okay. Now with our hallucinogens, you can classify hallucinogens by chemical structure, by known pharmacological properties, by how much loss of awareness they cause, and by how dangerous they are. Okay, there's two major groups here. We have our Phantastica and we have our Deliriants. And honestly, these things do such different things. Phantastica is usually what people think of when they think of hallucinogens. Deliriants are classified in the hallucinogen category, but really produce different effects. So Phantastica are going to alter perceptions, while still allowing the user to remain in communication with the present world. So the person is able to sort of function, they are able to know what's happening actually around them, even when they are having hallucinations. Deliriants produce this more mental confusion, greater clouding of consciousness, and really a loss of touch with reality. Okay, so now breaking down Phantastica, we have our Indole hallucinogens and our Catechol hallucinogens. Again, these are different things, and they produce different effects. Indole hallucinogens, these are drugs that have the same basic indole structure as the neurotransmitter serotonin. Examples of these are going to be LSD or psilocybin. Psilocybin is the active ingredient in what people call magic mushrooms. They grow on their own, but there's also psilocybin that is synthesized and created in a lab setting. And that's really what's used for research studies. Now, then we have catechol hallucinogens. Let me go back. Indole hallucinogens are also often considered our, quote, classic hallucinogens. Okay, catechol hallucinogens. These are drugs that have the same basic catechol structure of the neurotransmitters norepinephrine and dopamine. And these are going to be more things like mescaline, MDMA. MDMA is typically ecstasy. So when we say ecstasy, we mean MDMA. But if you hear people use the term Molly or sing about the term Molly, that is similar, very similar to ecstasy, and it is an MDMA derivative. Okay, these drugs are less classic hallucinogen and more feelings of empathy, feelings of connectedness. Okay. Of note, the LSD and psilocybin, well, not so much the LSD anymore, but the psilocybin is really being researched for things like addictions, depression that's not responding to classic treatments, some with PTSD or trauma, but some with grief, end-of-life issues, people with cancers. Now, the catechol hallucinogens, things like MDMA, are really being looked into. Of course, people have used it for couples therapy, for a long time. To be clear, these things are not legal at this point unless you're using them in a research setting. They're also really used for anything that needs somebody to feel a bit more calm, at peace with the world, connected to others. So that would be that kind of couples therapy or engaging empathy. But also MDMA has been researched, and it looks pretty good research for post-traumatic stress disorder. Okay. Indole hallucinogens. You know what? Actually, I want to go back. I have one more thing to say. As far as PTSD treatment, another thing that you may see out there is marijuana for PTSD treatment. And just to be clear, it's not that just using marijuana helps people with PTSD. It's using marijuana in order to get people to sit, feel calm, and talk, and then more so engage in exposure therapy seems to be working well. So it's still the exposure therapy. It's just that sometimes the marijuana is helping people in session have more productive exposure therapy sessions. Okay, moving on. Sorry, that was a lot of information. Let's talk about Albert Hofmann. 1938, LSD was synthesized by Albert Hofmann. These are the good old days where you did research on yourself. So, in 1943, Dr. Hofmann took large doses, real large doses, and then wrote down the effects of all these different drugs that he was creating. The dose he took was 5 to 8 times normal effective dose. A lot. There's actually a documentary out there, it's pretty cool, about Hofmann on his, time when he was drugging himself. And it's pretty entertaining. You may want to look it up. Potency of the drug attracted attention. Okay, comparable effects of mescaline would require 4,000 times the dose to get the result that they were getting from LSD. So, therefore, there was a lot of research that went into this, and the government got real interested. So 1950s through 1970s, a lot of research attempting to develop a model of psychosis, widely used as adjunct to psychotherapy. In the 1970s, funding institutes stopped supporting human research. Most research since 75 has been conducted in animals in an effort to understand the mechanism of neural level. It's coming back. As I said, the research is coming back. Unfortunately, the National Health, the people that fund research and give a lot of the grants, NIDA is the term that's used, has said that they're not going to fund this at this time. So most of the people who are getting funding are getting it from private donors who really believe in this. So there's always people out there looking for people with money who believe in looking into this. Okay. There was also secret Army and CIA research. This was not okay. Poorly done. Violated many ethical codes. The idea was that the CIA and the military government wanted to know if they could use these drugs as a weapon. And so they tried it out on unknowing soldiers. And if you are given LSD and you don't know that you were given LSD, it's really, really upsetting. The U.S. was required to pay reparations to research subjects. Okay, Timothy Leary. So Timothy Leary was a professor at Harvard, legit professor, started doing research on LSD, psilocybin, started using it himself, and loved it. He loved it. He loved it so much that he started a religion called the League of Spiritual Discovery and used LSD as a sacrament. Here's the problem. Timothy Leary loved LSD so much that he thought everybody should be able to use it whenever they wanted to. He felt like people should be using the drug while their clients were using the drug. It was out of control. And because of that, he killed all of the legit science that could have been going on with the drug. He made it just like terrible. And because of his wild antics and behavior, the research was shut down. So that's a problem. And of course, he was fired from Harvard, but that's a whole other thing. Recreational use peaked in the 1960s. Use declined due to anecdotal reports of problems associated with bad trips, prolonged psychotic reactions, worries about possible chromosomal damage, self-injurious behavior, quote, flashbacks. Now, having said this, again, interestingly, people in the CIA and different groups like that were actually planted within these groups of hippies, if you will. So hippies were out using hallucinogens, and they loved and they trusted everybody. And then, somebody would come in and intentionally introduce bad LSD or start talking about other people that had had problems and other people that had reported or turned people in and created distrust and bad things within these groups. And so part of it is that. All right. Now, LSD pharmacology. One of the most potent psychoactive drugs. Zero known human overdose deaths. The LD50 is about 400 times the behavioral effective dose. It would be nearly impossible to overdose on LSD or psilocybin. Nearly impossible. We have a legal drug, alcohol, real easy. Easier to overdose on Tylenol, right? Like, no, not a single human overdose death. Now, that doesn't mean that if you take too much LSD, you're not going to be happy about it. If you take LSD and nobody's watching you, you may do something stupid. Like walk off a balcony. Like you may do something stupid while on it, but no deaths due to the actual drug. Okay? LSD is usually taken orally. It's absorbed through the gastrointestinal tract. The mechanism of action, the best evidence indicates that LSD acts by stimulating serotonin 2A receptors. This picture down here is a sheet of LSD. We see the little white dots. An LSD tab, or whatever you want to call it, is very small, like maybe the size of a small fingernail. It's very small, and you would just put it on your tongue and let it go. And it's very potent. Okay. Now, it's metabolized by the liver. The half-life is about 3 hours. Tolerance develops rapidly, intensely rapidly. Tolerance develops so rapidly, this is confusing, that people do not become addicted to it. Because if you use it right away after people use the term sort of come down from it or come out of your trip, if you used it right away, you would actually have no response to it. So you can't just take it again. And also, people come out of this not really looking to jump in that very second again. Often people are mentally tired. So there's that. And cross-tolerance does occur among LSD, mescaline, and psilocybin. Physical dependence to LSD or other hallucinogens has not been demonstrated. Now, we have some other things here. Modification of perception. So these are behavioral effects. Let's see. So visual images. Users see shapes, patterns, usually with intense colors, brightness. Users report an altered sense of time, changes in perception of their own bodies, alterations of auditory input. Now, I love this word for some reason, but synesthesia, this is a mixing of senses. And some people experience synesthesia without using drugs, but that is that you hear something, but you see it. You see what you hear, or you feel what you smell, or you, it can be opposite. Like you hear something that you've seen, but it's not actually making a sound. That kind of thing. That is the mixing of senses, synesthesia. People also experience enhanced emotionality. So images may be perceived as beautiful or awe-inspiring. They also may be experienced as intensely sad or intensely frightening. Now, while I'm saying people don't become dependent, you won't die on this, there are a lot of people that really dislike this experience. There are people who love this experience. This is an experience where you're in or you're out, right? You take this drug and you are now on it until it is finished. Like it or not. It typically lasts 6 to 9 hours. That's LSD. The first 20 minutes you have autonomic responses. The next 30 to 40 minutes, alterations in mood, perception, sensation. Within an hour, you have full intoxication. So pretty much loss of self-awareness, loss of control of behavior may occur, depending on how much you took. Let's see. It's impossible to determine the true incidence of adverse reactions because some bad reactions may be due to drug impurities, not the actual drug. Now, people do talk about this hallucinogen persisting perception disorder. It's questionable. It also may be that some people would have had these issues anyway and they just happen to take LSD. It's relatively rare. Excuse me. Panic reactions, that's way more common than, flashbacks or these other things. So going back to this flashbacks, persisting perception disorder, Timothy Leary, as I said, one of the problems is that he suggested that everybody take it. And that is not a good idea. People who have a family history of schizophrenia or psychotic disorders, anyone who has had a psychotic episode on their own before should not use this drug. It appears to make it worse or jumpstart it if they're already predisposed to it. If you are someone who's not predisposed to having these issues, this will not cause those issues, from what we know. Here is a mushroom. This is a psilocybin mushroom. The active ingredient is psilocybin. So several varieties of magic mushrooms. This is the most well-known. Albert Hofmann isolated psilocybin in 1958. Dried mushrooms are about 0.2 to 0.5% psilocybin. Where do these mushrooms come from? Fields where cows poop. After the rain, if you go out into a field, don't do this, actually, but if you go out into a field where cows have been, these mushrooms grow from them. So then people want to wash them, dry them, and then people either eat them as is, or they, put them in a coffee grinder or something like that, and grind them up and then put them in pill form or take them that way or make tea. Lots of options. Now, a lot of people experience pretty unpleasant gastrointestinal issues because you are eating a raw mushroom. So that can be quite unpleasant for people. When psilocybin is used in a research setting, you will use a synthesized version of it, meaning lab created. So then you don't have those other issues. Okay. Over the past decade, research has increased. Recent studies have investigated the drug's effects on feelings of spirituality. Acute effects. Psilocybin is dose-dependent. It introduces intense changes in mood, perception, thought. Most individuals describe it as pleasurable, but high doses can really cause a lot of anxiety also. Longer-term effects, relatively unknown. Actually, so this is just physical. So one study indicated no long-term impairment. The study that you will read for your discussion assignment does talk about some long-term mental health. Okay. Other indole hallucinogens, morning glories, Hawaiian baby wood roses, DMT, and ayahuasca. So morning glories and Hawaiian baby wood roses, that's really dangerous. Those would probably kill you. DMT, you should know a little bit about from one of our first discussion assignments. I think it was actually the second one. And now ayahuasca, ayahuasca is going to be used more in Native American or First Persons ceremonies. Often it is given to people as a small drink, and these ceremonies are available for people that are really looking for that. Like, you don't just kind of happen upon them, but there are ayahuasca ceremonies in the U.S. as well as in Canada in certain communities. Okay. There's some catechol hallucinogen structures to look at. Now, let's talk mescaline. Oh, by the way, ayahuasca, one reason people do not care for it is that there is usually a purging that happens. So basically you take the ayahuasca, it sets in, you vomit, and then you experience your classic hallucinogenic time. Okay, peyote. This is peyote, a small, spineless, carrot-shaped cactus. Mescaline is the primary active ingredient in peyote. Also, used by Native American communities. Synthesized in 1918, more than 30 psychoactive compounds have actually been identified in peyote. The Native American Church uses peyote as a sacrament. There have been some legal issues here. So the church is actually an amalgamation of Christianity and traditional beliefs and practices of Native Americans. In 1990, the Supreme Court ruled that Oregon could prosecute its citizens for using peyote. However, in 1994, the U.S. Congress said that's not okay, and the quote was, "No Indian shall be penalized for peyote use for legitimate traditional uses." And now that's where it gets fuzzy. And that's where, sometimes they invite other people in, and if you pay a certain amount, then you're allowed to be part of this ceremony. Some people do this for the right reason. Some people do it to make money. Okay. Mescaline is rapidly absorbed after oral administration. Most mescaline is excreted unchanged. Its half-life is about 6 hours. Psychological and behavioral effects, you're going to see low-dose effects or primary just euphoria. High doses are going to be the full hallucinogenic effects. Tolerance develops more slowly to mescaline than LSD, but you do see cross-tolerance. Okay, now we have our MDMA stuff here, and these are hallucinogens that are synthetic. So synthetic hallucinogens, these are pills. If you see them, this doesn't look like a plant. Chemically related to amphetamines. Anecdotally, though, more similar to mescaline. But the chemical structure is closer to amphetamines. Okay, so MDMA, we're going to say ecstasy, or people are using Molly more often now, but it's generally the same thing. Prior to 1985, some psychiatrists used it as a therapeutic aid. In 1985, it was moved to Schedule 1. A little dramatic. Increased heart rate and blood pressure, increased euphoria, sociability, heightened sense of closeness with others. In animal research, you do see some selective destruction of serotonin neurons. However, there's limited evidence of neurotoxic effects in humans. So when they came out with this research on animals, people freaked out a bit. There's actually limited evidence that it's going to cause long-term problems in humans if used occasionally. But you do sometimes see a little bit of a mood decline after high use of MDMA. I need to go back to MDMA here. So, okay, so some other things about this are that MDMA has negative effects when people become dehydrated. And that's where they really think that the problems with the brain or possible death occur, is that people go to parties, raves, that's what, anyway, it was like, it's a rave drug. Now it's, different party kind of style. But they go, they want to dance, and they 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 don't drink water, and they're sweating, and they're dehydrated. And that can be dangerous. They show that when people use MDMA in settings where they are not dancing and becoming dehydrated, that you don't see the same negative effects. So that's interesting. It's something that's being looked into right now. Other things you might notice about people who are using MDMA is the pacifier thing. If you've ever noticed that sometimes people have pacifiers that they wear around their necks because they're babies. No. Ecstasy, it creates a sensation in the jaw. People will clench their jaw And if you clench your jaw and you're kind of not paying attention, well, you might chew your tongue off. Chewing your tongue off would be bad. So pacifiers are actually used kind of to help with that jaw clenching and to not chew your tongue off. I'll leave you with that. Now, deliriants. Deliriants are a whole other thing, okay? So we've got our Phantastica. They have similar effects, all the different Phantastica. Deliriants have some similar effects. They act primarily through the serotonin 2A receptors. That's Phantastica. By comparison, deliriants, which I personally don't think should be in the hallucinogen category, have a greater tendency to produce mental confusion, loss of touch with reality, and they act through a number of different brain mechanisms. Okay, so PCP, may have heard of that. PCP, well, let's say by 1960, it had been characterized as an excellent anesthetic for monkeys, a medically safe but psychologically troublesome anesthetic for humans, like real troublesome. Psychological effects were unpredictable. Currently, PCP is licensed for use as an animal anesthetic, and so therefore, people will break into like veterinary clinics and get PCP. Most people report not liking PCP, and yet other people keep using it. You can read more about it in your book, but it is not a popular, I'm not concerned about a lot of people all of a sudden deciding to have some sort of PCP epidemic. Okay. In the 1970s, you had angel dust, and so basically you sprinkled a little bit of PCP onto your marijuana. Relatively inexpensive, easy to manufacture, most common cause of drug-induced visits to the ER. Now, you don't want to have angel dust on your marijuana if you don't know it's there. That will make you feel really confused and unhappy. A lot of legends about PCP effects, but little data. Like you have legends of like somebody chewing off somebody else's face. Most likely, somebody who chewed off somebody else's face also has their own psychotic problems separately from the drugs. However, the drugs are not helping. Okay, mechanism of action. It binds selectively to the stigma receptor. Other deliriants also bind to this receptor. Now we have ketamine, and ketamine is one of those things that you have as a discussion question, so you already know about ketamine, right? Or if you haven't done that one yet, you will. Ketamine, or special K, of course, as you know, ketamine is a deliriant, but it's also being looked at for antidepressant effects. Okay. We also have our dextromorphan. Wait, yes. And we also talked about that one before. Also a deliriant. These cause different degrees of depressant and dissociative effects. We've talked about both of them before, so I'm going to move on. Okay. We have our anticholinergic hallucinogens. So this is a group that contains both naturally occurring and synthetic chemicals. Naturally occurring chemicals come from the potato family. 3 pharmacologically active alkaloids are responsible for the effects of these plants. Okay, and all are potent central and peripheral cholinergic blockers. Physiological effects. Blocks production of mucus in the nose and throat, prevents salivation, mouth becomes dry, and perspiration stops. Temperature can increase to fever levels, that's dangerous. Heart rate increases, eyes dilate, resulting in inability to focus. At high doses, the behavioral pattern resembles toxic psychosis. Delirium, mental confusion, loss of attention, drowsiness, loss of memory for recent events. This doesn't sound like a party, but some people do it. Now, here are some things to absolutely stay away from. These will kill you. These are used to kill people. Belladonna, also considered the deadly nightshade plant. I watched an awesome movie of Tinkerbell the other day with my daughter, and they used nightshade powder to get rid of an animal that they thought was scary. And I was like, I teach her about something like that. Mandrake, henbane, datura, all of these are dangerous. Synthetic anticholinergics are widely spread to treat pseudo-Parkinsonianism. And pseudo-Parkinsonianism, as you know, is produced by antipsychotic drugs. Okay. This is also the cutest mushroom and horribly deadly. This will also kill you. Okay, this is our Aminata muscaria. Its effects are dissimilar to other hallucinogens. It acts as a GABA antagonist, and it will kill you. This is the kind of mushroom that was used a long time ago when like chefs would poison kings and then they would die. You also sometimes hear about people going out and picking mushrooms and making food with them and then getting very sick or dying. Please do not go outside of your home and go pick mushrooms and then eat them. Please only eat the mushrooms that you find in a grocery store unless you are an expert mushroom hunter. Last thing here is salvia. This is another one we talked about within our gray market drug discussion. It can be smoked, it can be eaten. It acts as a kappa opioid agonist. Like psilocybin, it may cause mystical type effects in the laboratory, but it happens quickly. If you're interested, a lot of people on YouTube have videoed themselves using salvia, so if you're interested, that's always an option of something to do over the weekend or whenever. I think that's generally it. We've gone through a lot of things. I said a lot of stuff today. I gave you a lot of information. A lot of things to think about. Okay, see you later.